Thank you, Jim, and welcome to the incredibly awesome WGA Winter panel you're about to watch. It's awesome for a couple of reasons. One is we've got a fantastic, important, relevant topic, and we've also got amazing panelists. Of course, fellow Governor David Ige is going to join us, and Microsoft President Chief Legal Officer Brad Smith. To kick things off, of course, I'm Doug Burgum, former chair, and want to say again, thanks to the WGA staff and all those WGA members that support the WGA. What a fantastic organization, and thank you for your support of WGA during this incredible time that we're going through right now. WGA is always tackling important topics that are relevant to the Western U.S., and during my opportunity as chair, we focused on reimagining the rural West. And part of that, there was three components to that initiative, three pillars. One was opportunity, one was connectivity, and the other was community. And part of the recommendations, which governors and their staffs and sponsors around the Western U.S. participated in, was really three big recommendations. One was the importance of building healthy, vibrant communities that attract workforce as a new way of economic development. It's no longer about creating jobs. We've got all kinds of jobs available in America. It's a question of how do you get workforce, and to do that, you need to have great quality of life where people want to live, and that's how you get that workforce there. The second thing, of course, is critical to that, because particularly in rural America, got to have connectivity. And that's why it's going to be important. We've got, as I had to have Microsoft on our panel, but developing policies and financial solutions across our country that bring broadband access to rural communities. And this whole initiative was pre-pandemic. Well, now that we've seen during the pandemic, as education has gone to distant learning, as new forms of healthcare, whether it's mental and behavioral health or for regular healthcare appointments, or all kinds of recovery and support, everything that's happening online, 7x24 hour, cannot happen without broadband. So again, very reminiscent of WGA to be working on that as a key pillar, even pre-pandemic. And then, of course, the last thing, always important, local leadership with the capacity to develop a shared vision for the community. But I know from working with local leaders closely here in North Dakota, everybody needs and wants broadband to cover all of these critical, whether it's industry, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, an important component. And we've also seen that the pandemic has challenged economies everywhere. But one of the things that's opened up for rural America is we've also seen a shift. There's been an outpouring of people from the urban areas moving towards attractive, healthy, vibrant communities across the West. Some of them, those communities across the West, are experiencing real estate booms because of the knowledge workers that are moving to work remotely from those locations. And the communities that had broadband have been able to take advantage of that huge demographic shift. Those that were limited with broadband have been limited in their ability to succeed. And so, again, whether it's remote work, remote learning, video conferencing, telehealth, these are all key. And of course, we're again honored to have President Brad Smith from Microsoft here to talk about technology. But before we dive deeper into that, and before I introduce Brad, I want to turn it over to also another former chair, did a fantastic job chairing WGA, fellow Western Governor David Ige of Hawaii. David?
Thanks, Governor Burgum, and welcome to everyone to the Western Governors Association Winter Meeting. I'm also honored to have also served as WGA chair during which time we launched the Biosecurity and Invasive Species Initiative, which focused on the impacts that invasive species, pests, and pathogens have had on ecosystems, forests, rangelands, watersheds, and infrastructure, and the role that biosecurity plays in addressing the risks posed by these invasive species. I'm proud of the collaboration that went into this initiative and the fundamentals that support this important cause: protect, improve, empower, support, and standardize are core principles for all policies. These precepts should be applied to all that we do. The pandemic has shone a spotlight on many of the inequities in our communities. The haves continue to have, while the have-nots continue to lose out. In Hawaii, we went from the lowest unemployment rate in the country to the highest in the country in the blink of an eye. It doesn't matter whether you're rural or urban, everything hurts when you leave the country. Access to education will continue to exacerbate and perpetuate this problem. Like much of the West, Hawaii is largely rural and lacks broadband connectivity in many of the most rural communities. So that's an issue we've also trying to solve. As Governor Burgum said, we also have been adapting. For example, schools have procured Wi Fi vans to accommodate students with lack of accessibility at home. These Wi Fi hotspots are also open to allow families access and not just the students. This is helpful for things like unemployment claims, which are now 100% online. Governor Burgum, I look forward to talking with our guest, Brad Smith, about more ways to help us adapt and also improve the way we live long term.
Thanks, Governor Ige. Always great to be with you. And I love it when you talk about the word winter.
Yes, definitely a different meaning.
Yes. So, but let me just take my honor to introduce Brad Smith. Brad Smith has been with Microsoft since 1993, so 27 years. When I had an opportunity to work with Brad, he was chief legal officer. Fantastic, one of the top ones in the world, I'm sure, because around with a team that he has working around the world with the legal issues, because with technology and the legal system, technology often leads ahead of nations and their laws. So he's got one of the most amazing legal jobs in the world. In 2015, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella promoted him to president and chief legal officer, one of the only folks in the world to hold both those amazing titles. Satya and Brad together are one of the great leadership duos of all time. They have, since 2015, created $1.2 trillion of market cap. How do you do that? You take a $400 billion company, which is one of the largest market cap companies in the world, and in 5 years, you turn it into a $1.64 trillion market cap company. So today, we're honored to have really one of the true great business leaders in the world right here, right now. Microsoft, number 2 in the world in terms of market cap, ahead of just about every other household name you know, except Apple, but they're on the heels of Apple. Anyway, I would just say he's also an author, and with his book, Tools and Weapons, The Promise and Peril of the Digital Age, really understands the challenges facing technology and the opportunities. Perfect man to lead our discussion today. We're turning it over to you, Brad. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here with both of you. And I was just thinking about that same word, winter. I'll admit here in Seattle, it feels like just about every other day during the year, which is a long way of saying it's raining. But I think both of you have captured really well, one of the silver linings that has emerged from COVID this year, which is, I just think, a broadening public awareness of the importance of digital technology, of data, and ultimately connectivity, as you both have noted. I like to say that in so many ways, broadband has become the electricity of the 21st century. If we just think about what people are even experiencing this year, an explosion in telehealth services. So this is the future of healthcare. My gosh, just think about what it means for so many students in so many states. They're going to school remotely, and there will be a day, thankfully, we'll get them back to school buildings. But I think homework and so many other things are going to be pursued with high-speed broadband services. Certainly for business, small business, large business, it's really hard to imagine how one can succeed in the world of the future without this kind of connectivity. And yet the reality, as both of you have noted, is there are far too many people today in our country, including in the Western states, that still do not have it. And the one point I'll just add, and then turn it over, we can dive deeper, is in many ways, I just think the most shocking thing about the state of broadband in America is that we still don't have an accurate national map that tells us who has it and who does not. The federal government has been spending $8 billion a year to bring broadband to people who don't have it, but the FCC doesn't yet have accurate data on where that money should go. And we won't until that gap is filled. The Senate and Commerce Committee is working hard on an effort that would address this through appropriations. But we need to at least to follow into the footsteps of Lewis and Clark and have an accurate map, find our way around, bring this technology to where it's needed, and create a more common foundation in terms of infrastructure for everyone in this country.
Well, Brad, great place to start. You mentioned Lewis and Clark, of course, when they came through North Dakota on their journey to the West Coast in 1804. They spent the winter with the Mandan Indian villages here in North Dakota, 144 days. That's still the longest any tourist group has ever come to North Dakota during a winter time frame. So glad you got that plug in there. But I wanted to say back to you, Brad, on Microsoft has announced an incredible initiative. There's many things Microsoft's doing, but one is to help 25 million people worldwide to acquire digital skills in the post-COVID economy. Just tell us more about the vision, the strategy, and more broadly, talk about how you think the skills and education you're going to do is going to help people participate in the new world of work and the new world of education post-pandemic.
Well, thank you. I think it's a key question for all of us to think about. First, I think we should start by defining the problem. As we see it, more jobs have more digital content. And this isn't just sort of software developers and data scientists. These are people who work on manufacturing floors. These are people who are working in retail. These are people who are so-called first-line workers in healthcare and in almost every sector of the economy. And our strong sense is as the economy comes back, we're going to see more jobs require even more digital content than they did before. The problem is that we have too many people who don't yet have all of the digital skills they need today. And this is going to multiply as the decade progresses because we're just seeing AI and machine learning impact even more jobs as the years progress. I think the other thing worth reflecting upon is where we are as a nation in terms of investing in skills for our people. One part of this challenge is that for 20 years, from 1980 to the year 2000, employers actually steadily increased the amount they were spending to train their employees. As both of you know, this was an era when PCs were coming into the workplace. People had to be trained to use a computer, to use word processing, to use email. And then we got to about the year 2000. And employers, by and large, decided they didn't need to keep investing in that way. So we saw a decade of declining employer investments in training, and in the 2010s, a decade defined by stagnating levels of support. So it's a new decade, it's a new time, and we need to provide people with new skills. Now, I think some of this critically is going to come by the states, including in community colleges and public colleges and four-year universities and the like. But I think it's also a time for us to really think about what we all can do. For us at Microsoft, we see technology playing a valuable role. As you mentioned, we've launched an initiative to bring digital skills and certification on a free or subsidized basis to 25 million people around the world. We launched that on the last day of June, and by the last day of September, we had reached 11 million people. So we're going quickly. But I think we should be asking ourselves more broadly how we continue to encourage employers to invest more. Certainly when we're looking at the federal level at stimulus legislation, I think it's a time to ask across the country what kinds of incentives and assistance should small business be provided with to provide more skilling resources. I think among other things, this is the kind of step that would lead to faster hiring of people.
Governor Ige, do you have a question for Brad?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for that. You know, we are looking at the dynamic shift in our economy and expecting that there will be service jobs that no longer are there for people to return to, especially in a state that is dominated by the hospitality industry. How can states get involved with your initiative to upskill the labor force so that we can return stronger? As we had discussed informally, that's a huge opportunity. Every business has gone to telework. How do we benefit for the largest portion of our community?
Well, first of all, we are more than excited to work with any state that is part of this meeting. We work with a lot of workforce boards across the country. A good deal of this at Microsoft is centered in LinkedIn, which Microsoft bought about 5 years ago. But we've really connected every part of the company. And our focus is first on providing content, free content. All of the content that we provide is grounded in specific families of jobs. So, people can go online, state officials can go online. We use the LinkedIn economic graph to identify the kinds of jobs that appear to be growing the most in each state or region. We use the data on LinkedIn to then identify the skills that employers are looking for those job families. People can then access the content, and then we connect that with various certifications, tests, that then people pass and that we know employers value. And then we finally connect this with assistance. We identify jobs that are open in an area. We provide even online training to help people prepare for interviews and the like. Every time we get to partner with, say, a state workforce board or agency, we're able to be much more effective because we can pool our energy and our expertise. So we're very much interested in deepening that. The one other thing I'll note is a lot of what we need to do, not surprisingly, is reach people who are unemployed today, reach people who are often being supported by state agencies or nonprofits. So we provided $25 million of grants to nonprofits. This is where we often find there are people who are able to work as advisors, as mentors, as trainers. And so we're now well connected with a number of nonprofits in every state. And we would look forward to the opportunity to see how we can bring together what we do with what, say, a state is doing and what a local nonprofit is doing. I think when we combine forces in that way, we're really able to magnify our impact.
That's terrific. We certainly look forward to expanding how the state of Hawaii can work with Microsoft to really connect the dots and get people who are struggling and seeking to change careers because their previous one no longer exists. We certainly look forward to working with you.
Same here, for sure.
Yeah, certainly. Just the Microsoft initiative is exciting, but we know across the West and certainly in Hawaii, there are many who don't have broadband connectivity. I know that Governor Burgum has really focused on that. What are your thoughts on how to address this growing digital divide in a world where it's becoming more and more important that everyone be connecting? How is Microsoft approaching a solution?
Well, I'd say two things. First, we have our own initiative. We have a program we launched in 2017 called Airband. We set a goal in 2017 that we would not enter the telecommunications business ourselves, but partner with local telecommunications providers and provide financial assistance and technology and tools. And we said we would reach 2 million people by 2022 in rural America who did not have access to broadband. The good news is we've already passed that goal. We've recently hit 2.1 million people. We raised our target to 3 million by July 4th, 2022. And what we're really focused on is just, frankly, helping to change the market. To accelerate new technologies like TV white spaces, which is a wireless technology. I think increasingly we have the opportunity to think about where low Earth orbiting satellites can play a significant role. At Microsoft, where we're partnering with SpaceX in that space. And we're especially interested in working not just with the federal government, but with many states. I find myself that what the FCC sometimes lacks in terms of accurate data, a number of state broadband offices, in fact, have. And so increasingly, we've really worked and encouraged states to make targeted investments, in our view, typically the kinds of investments that can make it more affordable for smaller telecommunications companies to make the capital upgrades that will bring this kind of infrastructure to these rural communities. We also really hope we'll see this, frankly, as part of ongoing federal stimulus packages when we see them come next. We've advocated for federal assistance that would basically be technology agnostic, but targeted at the places where we don't have broadband today, and put a premium on speed. Speed in the sense of enabling companies and businesses and investors to move faster. Because I do think this is the kind of gap that we can close. I mean, this country has closed far bigger gaps, and we did it more than a century ago with electricity, for example, or with landline telephones. We can close the broadband gap if we can just put our minds to it and bring what we've learned together.
Thanks. That's terrific.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that, Brad, that it's a gap we can close, and it's a gap we must close. And one of the reasons why we talked a little bit was not just for education industry, but also healthcare with telehealth, but also with the data. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing during this pandemic is that the pandemic is really about math. I mean, there's so much math involved in this in terms of, how it spreads, capacity, treatments, approaches, education, all of this. But Microsoft, of course, works a lot with big data. You mentioned AI and machine learning, but maybe just for our audience today, talk a little bit about maybe some of the work that Microsoft's doing related to health and health data, and how important that is, and what you see there as the future, both in terms of opportunity and challenges.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about that, because I, in so many ways, think that this offers some of the most profound lessons of 2020 for every governor and every person who works for, say, a state or local, or for that matter, national government. At Microsoft, we're working with 15 states and 25 nations on basically the data services, the AI services to track COVID transmissions. We've been working with scientists using data to advance therapeutic treatments. We've worked with the CDC to stand up a national data lake to then support the equitable and fair and secure distribution of vaccines. We're fanning out now to start working with every state that wants to put data to work to manage vaccine distribution. And I just think that this is the future. It's just so interesting to me to think about how much our daily lives today are grounded. It doesn't matter who you are, in just reading about our cases up or down. But in many ways, that's just scratching the surface. I think there's an extraordinarily important lesson that comes, just say, from one slice of this. Just think about how important it is to public health for every county executive and every governor to have accurate data about something like ICU hospital bed capacity. And I've been struck here in Seattle, we live in the shadows of Amazon and Microsoft and all these great tech companies. In our county, in Seattle, King County, we started 2020 with no systemic data available on the hospital beds, and whether they were occupied and what kind of patient was in that hospital bed. And so we've all made these tremendous advances this year, and we've understood along the way that a lot of this is high math, but some of it is just very common sense. Everybody has to count the same thing. They have to count the same thing the same way. You have to have then integrated data systems as we have in our Power BI system, so then it can all come together and a governor can look at a laptop dashboard. I was so struck in April. I had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Greece, and he had a dashboard that showed every hospital bed in the entire country, a nation of 11 million people. And I was like, wow, I wish we had that in Washington state. Well, increasingly we do. And I think what we should take away from this is that this is not just vital for healthcare. It's really vital for every public need and every public service. This is the key to maximizing taxpayer revenue and solving public problems. And it does mean that everywhere we look, as you have been a leader in North Dakota since you were elected 4 years ago, it really involves having CIOs at the state that are bringing the best, not just of digital technology, but data and data analytics to every part of state government.
Well, everything you said is fantastically true, Brad. And of course, we have appreciated the partnership with Microsoft here in North Dakota. We did early on, as you know, roll out Microsoft Dynamics to assist with our contact tracing and all of our test registration. We're working up the report on that now, but the early things I've seen is this will literally have saved us hundreds and hundreds of jobs and tens of millions of dollars just in terms of cost, because it was primarily a paper-based process, as you described in the state of Washington before that. And then with the automated data, we're also able to pursue what we need to do in every state, which is to both save lives and save livelihoods. And so having the data, the timeliness of it, the accuracy of it is really, really critical. So in closing, Brad, as we head towards the end of our session, any closing thoughts or inspiration that you might have for the governors? And I think in particular, one thing I've seen is that state governments have trailed industry in terms of adopting technology. I think there's a silver lining that's coming out of the pandemic, where all of a sudden a lot of work and business processes in government have been forced out of the fax era and the paper era and into the digital era. But what advice would you have for all of the state leaders and their teams going forward on how to take advantage of the opportunity presented by the pandemic for digital process reinvention?
I would just pull some inspiration from one of the more interesting lessons I've had the chance to learn. And it really speaks to the future of public health, but to the future of everything. I was very struck. I had a conversation earlier in the year with a leading public health expert in Japan. They went through SARS a decade ago. It turns out that you're better at something if you did it a decade ago rather than a century ago. And for us, the last pandemic was over 100 years ago. But I asked, why are cases so low in Japan? And the person offered several theories, but part of it was actually an extraordinary lesson in the use of data. They recognize that when there's something like an epidemic that emerges, with real-time data, you could identify hotspots. You could see where they emerged, and you could immediately move testing and tracing resources to address the hotspot. Think about it like something else that's very common in the Western states, fighting wildfires. You identify the fire, you bring the firefighters to the fire, you try to contain it as quickly as possible. But of course, you need to know where the fire is. And then you need to know where your resources are, and then you swarm them. And it turns out that when you do that, you can avoid a lot of broader remedies that are much more challenging, like locking down an entire country or state or county. I think this ability to use real-time data and digital technology to identify problems and move public resources to address them quickly is, I think, part of the future of what it will mean to be a great governor, to be a great state government, frankly, to be a great county government. And we can apply this not just to public health, but to so many other things. And I think that really should give us inspiration about what technology and data together can do.
Well, that certainly inspires me, and the wildfire example is a great one and also relevant to this incredible year of 2020 that we've gone through this year. So I want to thank you, Brad, for being with us today. I want to thank Microsoft for their support and sponsorship of WGA, and I want to thank Governor Ige. Thank you for your leadership, both of your state, but also your past leadership of WGA. And again, thanks to all who are tuning into this virtual winter meeting. Hopefully you're someplace warm, enjoying this winter meeting virtually. But if you're not, maybe you're in some place like Colorado, like Jim Augsbury. And so we're turning back to you, Jim.